You can, I'm sorry. Can you guys hear me now? Okay. All right, I'm gonna step back here just for a moment here, because I just realized that you guys were not able to hear me. And I'm going to start again. Okay. So my name is Gabi Berman. This is a training on the 5 levels of self-care needed to build mental endurance and resiliency during a pandemic. I am delighted to be able to bring this topic to you. As many of you know, France and Germany just announced recently that they're actually doing a second lockdown. And we all know that France and Germany and all of Europe really is ahead of us. And so this pandemic is not going away anytime soon. It's affecting all of us, myself included, personally on so many different ways. And so we're super thankful to Dwight to allowing us to continuing to do these presentations, these webinars that are so important to our community and to helping all of us stay strong as we work through this really, really challenging time. And so with that, we'll go ahead and move on here. A couple of upcoming events and webinars that we have coming up in the next month. On November the 20th, we have a webinar that's being presented by Tawana Forbes. Tawana is our Director of Admissions. And this topic is a topic that's really dear to her heart as well as all of ours. It's the hidden epidemic of mental health and suicide in the African-American community, a topic that is probably not talked about enough. And then on the 8th of December, we have a presentation, another CEU by Dwight on surviving the loneliness of the pandemic during the holidays. Very appropriate as well for them. And we are also doing a holiday harvest food drive that's starting on November 1st. So Monday, we're going to start collecting or picking up. The marketing team will come out to you if necessary, picking up non-perishable food items that you wish to donate. We're going to be donating our items to the Coalition for the Homeless, an organization that we worked with in the past, and we really appreciate the work that they do. And this is our way and your way of being able to give back to them. So we can come pick them up from you, or you can come drop them off here at the hospital. Just reach out to me to coordinate, or if you work with Kim, Kelly, or Gabe on the marketing team, you can coordinate with them as well. And with that, just a couple of housekeeping items. And then we'll get into the presentation. So today's webinar is 1 hour long. That's including Q&A, which Dwight will open at the end of the presentation when he is ready. All participants on the phone will be muted during the webinar, and that's just because there's too many people on the phone to open the phone line. And we do ask that if you do have a question, please ask your questions, but use the Q&A and chat function, whichever is either one is fine. And we'll monitor the questions throughout the presentation, and Dwight will answer them toward the end. Also, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Resource Center of our website. So if you're not able to make it, or if you'd like to watch it later, or somebody else would like to see this, you can direct them there. We'll go ahead and have that posted sometime next week. That'll be up on the website. When the presentation ends or you exit Zoom, you're automatically going to receive a prompt in your web browser that's going to take you to another web page, and that web page is going to bring you to the evaluation for the webinar so that you can collect your CEU credits. So please make sure you go ahead and complete the evaluation. And lastly, you will receive 1 CEU for attending this particular training, and your certificates of completion will be emailed to all attendees following the end of this webinar. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Vicki, who is going to go ahead and she's going to present Dwight Bain, the speaker, and say a couple of words.
Good morning, Dwight, and good morning, everyone. So this is about our 10th episode since we started in April, and we've had over 3,000 people that have registered for the CEU events as we have done them this summer. You know, yes, it is still a hard time, but the encouragement on my part would be stay in peace and stay in hope. We're going to get through this. And that is what Dwight has just done such a beautiful job through these months of encouraging us in ways of how can we keep sustaining and do it in a healthy way. You know, Dwight, we're always proud to introduce you. I certainly am. Dwight is the founder and president of LifeWorks Group, and he's nationally certified As a counselor in practice since 1984, his primary focus is on solving crisis events with creative solutions. Dwight is a trusted media resource who has been interviewed on over 500 radio and television stations, as well as quoted in over 100 newspapers' websites, including New York Times, the Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, the Atlantic Journal, Orlando Sentinel, Miami Herald, Newsday, Fox Business, and MSNBC. Dwight, we don't want to take any more time, but to turn it over to you and say, again, thank you so much for all that you do. The hours of research that Dwight does each time for these presentations is just unbelievable, because he's taking very, very seriously that this is a crisis in our community, in our nation, in our world. And his heart's desire is, how can we, as a group of people, keep everyone healthy and safe and learn how to get through things? So I turn it over to you, Dwight.
Thank you very much, Vicki, for those kind words. And yes, I particularly appreciate that we will survive. And we're going to do it better because today we're going to learn and apply the 5 levels of aggressive self-care. There's a 5-step neurological process to use in an extended time of crisis. And this is the longest crisis event in United States history in modern times. And we're about 40% of the way through. I'll give you more details as we go along. Now, remember, today we're talking about 5 core issues. The good news is Gavi will be reaching back out to you with very detailed step-by-step process for you, for your clients, for your family. But as we go along, be thinking today, not so much about the rest of the world, your clientele, the people that you serve. Those folks are important. Today, I want you to focus on you. This is a long, drawn-out time of crisis. We're going to survive. We survive better together. Just like the flight attendants say at the beginning of a flight, put the oxygen mask on you first. As you see on the slide, this is my local Publix. This was March 11. The Publix here in the Winter Park Village off of 1792. This is the toilet paper, paper towel, Clorox wipe aisle. And take a look at the meat aisle. COVID-19 changed everything, and nothing would ever be the same. Somebody sent this to me, and I thought, yeah, that explains it. It's been a long week. This is how I felt at noon on Monday. Or a mom sent me this one. My kindergartner on a 40-minute video call. Yeah, that's how it works, doing homeschool with your kiddos, because COVID is going to be here for another year, year and a half. Look at the quote. There are decades where nothing happens. There are weeks where decades happen. And every single day puts us into a level of exhaustion and depletion unknown to our generation. This is the Wall Street Journal earlier this week. Pandemic fatigue is real, and it's spreading. Everybody's exhausted and depleted. And that's why I don't want you to think about the next 12 to 18 months. We're only on week 32 at the time of this recording. I realize some folks will be listening later, and I'm glad you do. And if you're listening later, please share the YouTube channel from Central Florida Behavioral Hospital so that we can spread the word, because everybody's tired, and this is going to go on month after month after month. Some people call it the COVID time warp. Is it Monday? Is it Thursday? What month is it? It's kind of like the film Groundhog Day, and you may remember Bill Murray is a weatherman stuck in a time warp. I'll spoil the ending for you, because if you haven't seen it, I want you to watch it. I don't think it'll spoil it that bad, but spoiler alert, turn your ears off for 30 seconds. How do you survive a time warp? Well, the answer is you learn to play classical piano. You take ballroom dancing lessons. You learn how to catch the kid when he's falling out of the tree, because you know exactly when. How do you get out of a time warp? You learn new skills. Recently, my wife and I were in the Great Smoky Mountains. And if you've driven on the Skyline Drive, or you've driven in the Great Smokies, you know there are a number of different tunnels, dozens and dozens of them on that beautiful drive. As this time of year, the leaves are changing. And I want you to understand that COVID is a tunnel. It's not a cave. There's light at the other end. If you look closely, you can see the headlights of somebody coming, right? COVID's a tunnel. This crisis will end. We're going to keep moving forward because resilient growth will go on long after 2022. The lessons you and I learn, we call it post-traumatic growth in my industry, PTG. I know you've heard of PTSD, but today we're focusing on aggressive self-care to get you through. PTG has 5 core elements in the clinical research from University of Pennsylvania. A sense of personal strength. I will endure. You, not you taking care of the world, you being stronger. Don't worry about everybody else, but the mask on you first. Relationship growth. Yes, we are seeing a sharp uptick and spike in divorces, even though the court system is still closed to public participation, but so many people divorcing. What about the other group? Oh, yeah, their marriages and relationships are stronger. They're more committed and connected to their partner because PTG relationships get stronger. People check on their parents, and before you had to remind them to call mom, and now they had mom move in with them. There's a spiritual connection that happens in PTG. We look for new opportunities, new creativity. We'll talk about that as we go along today, but look at the last one. Again, this is from the Post-Traumatic Growth Institute and Training Center at the University of Pennsylvania. There's a deeper appreciation for life because I will survive. We will survive. Our family will survive. Our community will survive. That's why I so appreciated Vicki Lewis 7 months ago saying, how can we invest into our community? How can we lead the way and say, we'll get through this together? Well, that's to go deep into story. You see, communities, we learned this after the Pulse massacre, communities come together after crisis. But you don't know a person's real story until you know the backstory. A book I went through recently was called Dream More by Dolly Parton. And Dolly's a really interesting entertainer. I've never met her. I've read a lot about her. I was born about an hour from where she was born. And so I've always heard my whole life about Dolly Parton. But when my wife and I were in the Smoky Mountains, we had a chance to go by and visit a home that she and her 9 siblings grew up in with their mom and dad. You'll see it on the slide. That's the home. That's the bedroom. That's the kitchen for 12 people. You say, how did she do that? She learned resilience in the Smoky Mountains. She, like many of the neighbors, learned we don't have much, but we have each other. She learned growth. So when you look at entertainers and you say, well, why are you talking about Dolly? Oh, she illustrates post-traumatic growth because she came out of poverty in an area of the country that just did not give her advantages of education, not even one day of college. But she kept reinventing country music and then entertainment and film, and then moving forward over into television specials, theme parks. Maybe you've heard of Dollywood. That's where this museum exhibit is at, outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. Oh, yeah. And now as an author and a children's advocate that has placed over 100 million books into the hands of disadvantaged children. Now, there are a lot of people that were famous country music stars at one time, and they didn't keep reinventing, sometimes because they didn't work through the pain. They turned to drugs or alcohol. She didn't do that. She just kept reinventing. The reason we like stories of people like Steve Harvey or Dolly Parton, people that come on the other side of pain and difficulty and bankruptcy like Donny Osmond, is because they kept growing in a crisis. You and I can do that. And just outside of Dollywood, almost 4 years ago, the Great Smoky Mountain Fire in Gatlinburg. 14 people were killed, 190 people injured, $500 million in damage, almost 2,500 structures damaged, destroyed, 7,100 acres burned, an arson fire by a group of teenagers. How do you press on? How do you do like the firefighters in the slide? How do you keep going forward and fighting the fire? Because that's what you do. If you're joining us on today's training, you're a mental health professional. You're somebody who's facing horrible times. How do you press on? How do you keep going? How do you move forward? One breath at a time, one step at a time, because COVID-19 has brought physical and psychological challenges to you, your family, your clients, your coworkers. We've never seen anything like this before. And I think for many people, they're completely on empty. We're on week 32 at the time of this recording. We're looking at another 50 to 60 weeks. Is your tank full? I hope so. Because aggressive self-care, that's what it's about. How can you have more energy at the end of the day than when you started? Because COVID-19 has created the most stressful work year in the history of the American people in modern times. 78% of people say this has affected my work. 35% of people working remotely say I work more hours, about 10 more hours a week than when I worked in an office. That's 40 extra hours a month, but they're only paid for 40. 25% say they've been burned out from overwork as a result of the pandemic. 85% say their mental health issues at work are affecting their home life. COVID stress is building. This is going to go on for years. Now, notice I said the stress. The pandemic will be done in about 50 weeks. The worst of it will be behind us about a year from now. November 2021 is the projection that the worst of the medical and physical elements of pandemic, the worst will be behind us, just like smallpox, tuberculosis. Today, we're talking about COVID psychological stress. We're talking about the mental health piece. That's going to go on for years to decades. 60% of of Americans expect widespread unemployment and economic depression, not just today. We are in the COVID recession, according to the global economic indicators. They're expecting recession over the next 5 years. When we look at how is this affecting you, loneliness. Loneliness will be our topic as we get on the other side of Thanksgiving, between Thanksgiving and the holiday season of Christmas and Hanukkah. I want you to understand loneliness already pushing people into depression from lack of socialization, burnout, lack of work-life balance, more stress, and for some, substance abuse, suicide. The numbers, because of isolation, desperation. We'll go deep into that subject. Make sure that one will fill up. Make sure you register early. I know that Gavi will get you the registration link as we send the follow-up tools from today's. Look at this. Since the pandemic started over 7 months ago, one survey showed 29% of people are drinking at work. Yeah, I know some of them are working at home. Why are they drinking? Almost a third of people, well, they're burned out. 33% since the pandemic started. That's how much burnout has gone up in just over 7 months. 1/3 of the people who were hanging in there, they were resilient, but the stress is too great. The pressure is too great. And the impact, 28% say they're isolated from family and friends. 30% struggling because family relationships are starting to fall apart. 33% say my home life is not good. 1/3. Now remember, this is just in 7 months, and we're looking at another year. 35% say my health has struggled. 1/3. 40% are losing sleep. The most important thing you can do for your mental health, to be able to get deep REM sleep. That's why there's so many cool mattress places, and Mike Lindell with his pillow hugging commercials on TV. And why do we talk about melatonin? And we talk about, well, because people are not sleeping. Coca-Cola is ending a number of their brands globally as part of the recession, but one of the new products they're launching, the only product they're launching, it's Coca-Cola designed to help you sleep at night. It has herbal teas, melatonin, and different products, holistic products to help you rest, because Americans are exhausted. 72% say the corona outbreak has seriously disrupted. 3 out of 4 people say the worst is yet to come. Why would they say that? Because they know the worst is yet to come. Over Half of people are afraid they'll lose their job or be laid off. We've seen that in our own backyard, the Walt Disney Company, Universal, SeaWorld, the Orange County Convention Center, the Orange County Airport, American Airlines, United, Delta, JetBlue. Almost 60% say, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job, because they're looking at so many of their friends that have lost their job. 45% are worried that their company will close. Yesterday, I talked to a business leader. He owned a number of businesses. He's closed half of them and is going to file bankruptcy because he said, we can't go on. 53% are still worried that they'll catch coronavirus. Almost 40% say, I've already lost a job or lost income or had my hours cut back, and people are afraid. According to the research, the pandemic is pushing Americans into a mental health crisis. Anxiety has tripled, depression has tripled just since it started. According to the research from the Centers for Disease Control, Johns Hopkins University, the United States is still ill-prepared, and some clinics and places are on the brink of collapse because their staff are burning out. Why? Domestic abuse cases have gone up dramatically, almost doubled. We still don't know exactly, but child abuse, and it's because there's so many kids that are off the grid because schools are open virtually. But what if that child got their breakfast and their lunch from a government program? What if that child who was bruised by an abusive parent or caregiver, what if the only safe person in their life was a teacher? The last time I checked, the Orange County school system, the county where I live in the greater Orlando area, had tens of thousands of students that are just invisible, that are ghosted. They're enrolled students, but they weren't officially withdrawn from school, and the school officials don't know where they are. Were they sold into sex slavery? Were they trafficked? Are they being abused? We don't know. But what we do know is that unemployment in the Orlando area in May was at 22.6%. To give you an indicator, the Great Depression in the 1930s in Orlando, unemployment was at 24%. Today, this moment, it's almost 19%. 1 in 5 people in the greater Orlando area do not have jobs. And 4 out of 5 Americans are not optimistic about their economic prospects next year. For the first time this week in Central Florida, the last week of October, home prices in October did not go up. Residential real estate flatlined, and home prices are starting to drop. It's supply and demand. And in my hometown, because I grew up here, we're coming into a rough time. I've lived through 5 recessions in Central Florida. You don't have to die from what's going to happen to the economy. I say you don't have to, because some people will feel like, I just can't go on. And sadly, they will choose suicide as an option. They will choose self-destructive patterns with drugs or alcohol. You don't have to. We will survive this, but you may have seen the news of a top Manhattan ER doctor, Dr. Breen, and she just got so worn out. She said, I can't do this anymore. I'm just so sad. And she took her own life. The research tells us there's a mental health wave coming. The worst of the physical medical pandemic, as Gavi said earlier, parts of Europe shut down because now in some places, a second wave, a third wave. Disneyland Paris closed yesterday. At the moment, indefinitely, just like Disneyland California closed indefinitely. Hasn't been open since March. See, Dwight, this is kind of depressing. Yeah. That's why people are turning to suicidal, homicidal thinking. They can't see a way out. They get disoriented. They can't solve problems because their prefrontal cortex is not working. They have distressing dreams or hallucinations, delusions. They feel consistently helpless and hopeless. They have psychogenic amnesia. They don't even remember how to get through this. And isn't it interesting? Because all I'm sharing with you, as Vicky said earlier, I do a lot of research. It's my favorite thing. I study, I learn 5-6 days a week so I can find things to help you, to equip you. That's part of my mission. If I can find tools and resources, and usually I'll spend 10 to 1, 10 hours for every 1 hour presentation. This one was more than double because I wanted to go deep into the research. What is happening in our country? Could you imagine if the world took mental illness and suicide as seriously as we talked about a pandemic? What would it be like? I'm just sharing with you clinical data from CDC, johnhopkins.edu, and research groups that are being able to say, here's what clinical data is telling us. Remember, clinical data tends to run a little bit behind because we're looking at what is happening and we're drawing conclusions. But what would happen if people said, I'm going to deal with mental illness? I'm going to stand up and say, here's a way to survive to my clients, to my friends, to the person in the mirror. Well, that's why we're talking about aggressive self-care, because when I looked at a research study done in the month of September, what is the most searched mental health term in your state? In Florida, financial stress. And when you start to look at different states, you'll see, wow, in Oregon, internet addiction. Same in Washington State. California, intimacy, because almost 100,000 people a week are leaving the state of California because there are no jobs. When you start to look at what's going on, people either face reality. I call reality the gift nobody wants to open up. The reality right now is painful, and we're going to survive. I know these are hard numbers. Hang in there. Because what happens if you avoid reality, you tend to go into denial, blame shifting, rationalization, minimization, avoiding, escaping, or you just start to hyper control things. And that leads to anxiety disorders and panic attacks. So how do people that work as first responders, you may have seen Google did a fantastic 1-minute video this week for national, I guess it was global first responder day. It was so well done, brought tears to my eyes. How do ER staffs go to work every day? How do they suit up and deal with the dead, the dying every single day? How do first responders stay mentally and physically strong? Well, they continually recharge. If you were here in my study in Winter Park, you would see I've got multiple screens in front of me, multiple electronic devices, smartphones and tablets on multiple stands and screens. I use multiple screens because I can track data and breaking trends. But one of the things I've learned is if they're unplugged, they're not useful. If you're unplugged, you'll burn out. You have to stay continually plugged in. And I know when I'm running a very fast data applications, I stay plugged in. I set the computer not to battery save mode, to peak performance. Are you set to peak performance? Because that's how ER staff work day after day, month after month, year after year. And they work in an emergency room 40 years before they retire and go work in a clinic, like a wonderful friend of mine named Brenda, who was an ER nurse of the year multiple times. And then when she and her husband retired, started working in a clinic. Because how do you keep going year after year? Well, you stay plugged in and charged up. Like what Dr. Rosenberg, who's chairman of the ER department at St. Joseph's in Patterson, New Jersey. At St. Joe's, he said, the pandemic intensity, the intensity of the medical seems to fade. So does the adrenaline, what's left of the emotions of dealing with the trauma and the stress. Now, this is an ER doc, a chairman of an ER hospital. He said there's a wave of depression, letdown, true PTSD, and a feeling of not caring anymore that's coming. And that was a month ago. True PTSD, because sometimes people say, well, I was not a military veteran, so I can't have PTSD. That is not accurate. It's just based on trauma. And friends, everybody's going through more trauma than we, I think, will in our adult lives. I think this is the challenge of our lifetime. Tom Brokaw wrote a book called The Greatest Generation. And their greatest challenge coming out of the Great Depression, coming into World War II and fighting a war on two fronts in Asia and in Europe. That great generation got through one breath at a time, because sometimes one step at a time is too hard. But I can take another breath. So why do we need aggressive self-care? Things are getting worse. There's stress everywhere, emotionally, financially, relationally. There's stress everywhere. And there'll never be a time or a season in your life without stress. But right now, it may be, at the moment, it looks like it's about 3 times higher than normal. And that's why we'll talk about loneliness and people that want to give up on our next training time in December, because so many people say, I can't manage this. Well, right now, it's 3 times higher than normal. Stress is more destructive than you could realize. It affects you at a cellular level. It can lead to inflammation, disease, for some, self-destructive choices and secret addictions like gambling, pornography, spending. You say, well, what can they do? I want you to know, I've seen executives who say, I haven't smoked weed since college and I'm doing it every day. One research study showed that 2% of physicians, 2% are using illegal drugs at work. They can't cope. COVID stress is going to continue for months. The projection right now is that we'll be at a stable place in about 8 months with the medical. But psychologically, things will get worse before they get better. Now, if you like outdoor activities, you know what a carabiner is. Those are the heavy-duty clips that keep you alive. And mental resilience is what we're going to talk about, because aggressive self-care will boost your immune system against disease, but it will also give you a mental toughness to face what is coming. This is a long recovery. It's the challenge of our lifetime, and we will endure if we have 5 of these carabiners to clip into: physical, emotional, relational, behavioral, and spiritual. You see, aggressive self-care, it's not one clip, it's 5. It's not one thing. It's multiple layered on top of each other. That's how you get the habit of resilience. But if you had to pick one that gets you the biggest bang for the buck, if somebody said, what's one thing I can do? Put down the glass. It's not going to make you feel better. It's just going to numb your brain. And pick up exercise. Pick up deep yoga, Pilates, and particularly breathe. Breathe. Pay attention to nutrition, hydration. If you had to pick one thing that would turn everything around, it's sleep. How are you sleeping? Are you sleeping better today than when the pandemic started? I am. Because what I found in the deep research of first responder teams, special force teams globally, how do they show up day out, suit up, do the toughest work in the world, and be stronger and energized at the end of the day? Well, they know how to breathe. They get enough sleep. How you doing? How you doing? I was about to say, how you doing? Because my wife watches too many old episodes of Joey on Friends. How you doing with your sleep? How you doing with your breathing? How you doing with hydration? How you doing with managing nutrition? Because if you're a Navy SEAL, you're always energized. You have mental toughness because you know how to box breathe. If you fall down, you get up. You know how to ask for help. You look for the good of what's happening around you, and you find who's shining a light in the dark times, and you hang out with them. You don't focus on negative if you want to survive. You focus on healing. My favorite thing to do, my form of exercise, is hiking. My wife and I hiked the Big Creek Trail, went past Midnight Hole. We went up to Mouse Creek Falls. You'll see it in the image on the slide. And a couple of miles uphill means a couple of miles downhill back. And it was refreshing. And it was powerful. Because if you had to pick one thing, breathe and get better sleep and exercise. But it's not one thing, it's 5 things. This young lady learned that. She was raped by her uncle multiple times, and that incestuous relationship led to having a baby out of wedlock when she was 15 years old. The baby died at a Memphis hospital, and her family let her stay to leave her home in Mississippi and to stay in Memphis to finish high school. In her senior year, she won Miss Fire Prevention based on an essay that she wrote. That's her receiving the check for an amazing $100 and a trophy. Here's the part that you didn't know. A girl that had been raped and had a baby that died, her uncle's incestuous relationship. That girl learned how to deal with pain. Oprah Winfrey, in her journal, she learned this from her mentor, Mama Maya Angelou. Oprah said, turn your wounds into wisdom. You see, when she went to the radio station to be able to pick up some more information about the Fire Prevention Award at the station, because she had kind of a huskier voice, the radio announcer said, I like your voice. Would you read this? And he handed her something from a wire service, and she read it. And he said, would you like to? Now, remember, Oprah's 17 and a half years old. He said, would you like to read the news and kind of do a volunteer internship? And she said, okay. Oprah had learned as a girl who was traumatized, post-traumatic growth. She learned how to turn wounds into wisdom. You see, that's emotional. It's the second clip. It's building up a sense of worth. My life matters. We're using photos or images or art. My daughter's a graphic designer. She taught me the power of art. We were in Toronto at the Art Museum, and she was standing in front of one of the Van Goghs, and she was just tearful and crying. And she said, Dad, isn't it beautiful? And I didn't understand, because she knew the backstory. Remember, until you know the backstory, you don't know the real story. She knew the backstory of that starry night and what that artist was going through. You have to go deep into emotion. You have to go into journaling. You have to let out pain. You have to say no to the bad so that you can focus on the good. That's what J.K. Rowling did. This woman living in a shelter in England, divorced, shamed by her family. She started to journal and to write. She lost a job because she was using the workplace computer to write about a boy named Harry who had been abused and rejected, but had a lightning scar on his forehead because there was something different about young Harry Potter. What would have happened if her English teacher had said, you're a good writer? Because her English teacher said, don't ever try to write a book. You don't know what you're doing. She didn't listen. When she hit rock bottom, look what she said. Rock bottom became the solid foundation in which I rebuilt my life. From a homeless shelter on welfare. Writing about a boy who had a couple of friends and every other strike against him, except one. He knew how to manage pain. How you doing? How you doing relationally? Do you face your relationship issues? Do you voice your needs to other people? Is your relationship with your partner stronger today than it was when the pandemic started? Thankfully, I'm married to my best friend, 35 years. We celebrated this summer. And our relationship is stronger. I can't explain that other than we both embraced aggressive self-care. Oh, yeah. And we each lost 25 pounds so far in the pandemic. It's the weirdest thing. Because it's not, what's the one big thing you're doing? Well, we're doing 5 small things is the one big thing. But what happened in working through the challenge and the crisis and aging parents and the difficulties and what's going to happen? How do you work as an essential worker and stay safe and not catch a disease that's 10 times more contagious than the flu? You have a lot of support. You learn the love languages of the people around you. You hug more. There's more affection and kindness. I practice the Elmo philosophy. Is it kind? And when I say Elmo, if you don't know the great philosopher Elmo, he's from Sesame Street. Look him up, because Elmo is just kind. And I know these are political times and people are saying hateful, awful things to each other. And that doesn't make a bad situation better. Listen, here's the rule in a crisis. Don't make it worse. Don't make it worse. In your relationships, are you saying things to make it better? I got you, babe. We're in this together. We're going to make it. We will survive. I'm here for you. Or in the crisis, are you saying things to make it worse? Because if you are, I want you to learn from Elmo, or maybe a Navy SEAL named Eric Gretchens, who was the governor of Missouri for a long time. Look at what he wrote after being a SEAL and coming back and going into public service. No one escapes pain, fear, and suffering. Yet from pain can come wisdom. From fear can come courage. From suffering can come strength if you have the virtue of resilience. So how do you and I build resilience? Sing in the storm. If you haven't seen a Broadway called Dear Evan Hansen, because Broadway will be closed for another 8 months. And it will have been closed over a year. That's never happened in history. But you can go online and see the cast, and you can see them sing, and I hope you do. Because relationally, when we connect, even if it's virtually, like right now through this virtual training webinar, when we connect relationally, it gives us the strength now to apply behaviorally. This is having a daily time to plan, a daily time to map out. Every morning, what's the day going to bring? What's my plan? Every night, the night before, I learned this from my wife. She came from an Army family. Hooah, go Army. You lay out your clothes the night before. You map out your day the night before. Every morning, I look at what's the big event of the day. Today, this Friday, it's you. I've been working, oh goodness, 6 weeks for our time right now. What could I say to give you a tool that would challenge you about aggressive self-care so that you would be physically, mentally, emotionally, behaviorally stronger every single day? What could I do that would challenge you to relax your mind or to go and stretch your mind with a new course and learn how to play the banjo? Yep, I got a banjo and I got a book. And my goal is to be able to play the Rainbow Connection by Christmas. What I did not know is that the banjo has 5 strings and 3 picks. I just liked how Kermit played it. One day you'll find it, the Rainbow Connection, the dreamers, the lovers, and me. La-di-da-dee-dee-dum-dum. It's almost like magic. Do you still have a list of lifetime goals? COVID-19 will end. But the lessons of resilience that you and I are learning, oh, those will go on. Are you reading every day? Are you reading? Are you stretching? Are you growing? There are certain things you and I can do. There are dozens. In fact, the follow-up resource Gabi will send you has over 60 proven steps that will energize you. We call it aggressive self-care. What if you're in a difficult circumstance? Nietzsche said it this way: that which does not kill us makes us stronger. Yes, to live through failure and difficulty and hardship makes you stronger. I don't think anybody exemplifies that better than Winston Churchill. He was given the opportunity to be Prime Minister of England days before the Blitzkrieg, the lightning attack from the Nazis. And when that happened, Churchill said, "We will fight on the beaches. We will fight on the landing grounds. We will fight in the fields, in the streets, in the hills. We shall never surrender." How did he do that? I hope that you remember, until you know the backstory. You don't know the real story. You don't know Winston Churchill until you know what he lived. He was 65 years old when he was given the chance to be prime minister, and he was not liked, and he had battled a lifetime of clinical depression. I hope you'll pick up a biography. It's a little lengthy. It's a little over 500 pages, but it's so riveting, you feel like you're reading People magazine. It's called The Splendid and the Vile, the saga of Churchill, his family, and defiance during the Blitzkrieg. The Blitzkrieg was the lightning attack of being bombed every night for a year. And Eric Larson, he released this book in February. Who knew that he would release a book about resilience? What kept him going in a time when everybody was being bombed and every day people died? In one of the interviews, because every single thing in the book, even though it reads like a magazine, but every single thing is factual biography based on actual documentation. One young boy asked what he wanted to be when he grew up. Do you want to be a fireman or a pilot or such? During the Blitz, he said, I want to be alive. I want to be alive. If you go to that part of England, you'll see the church that was bombed. The roof was bombed off. The spires, the walls remain. When they rebuilt the church next door, they left the spires. Bill Gates, at the 50th anniversary of the end of World War II, there's a marker there that talks about peace, that we all have a responsibility to peace. But what kept him going? How do you build resilience? Well, it's not just physical strength. It's not just emotional, relational, behavioral. You see, physical strength is measured by what we can carry. Spiritual strength, well, that's measured by what we can bear. She ain't heavy. She's my sister. Because the fifth element that you're going to clip into, if you want deep post-traumatic growth, deep healing and strength and power in a pandemic, that's right, power in a pandemic, you have to know what you believe. Are you reading for inspiration? Do you meditate? Do you listen to inspirational music? And I'm torn right now because I'm on the board of a radio station in Central Florida called Z 88.3. And I was there the day it started. It's just positive music. It's inspirational, nothing negative, no political hate. No, just positive inspiration, things that are safe for you and the little ears in the back seat. But I'm torn because even though I love the Z and I was there when it was born, and I'm heavily invested in saying, how can we stay positive and encourage people? Because 1 in 5 people in my hometown don't have jobs. How can we be part of getting food to them and toy drives? Because what happens to a dad who doesn't have a gift to give to his children? If you want a story that'll challenge you spiritually, understand when I say spiritual, I don't mean religion. Everybody has their own religion and usually fight about it. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your beliefs, the core of who you are. And there was a dad named Paul, and Christmas was coming, and he'd lost his job because he had an affair and got fired. And his wife said, I'm not going to divorce you. We have 6 kids, but I may want to beat the hell out of you every single day. And Paul worked as a janitor. And for Christmas, he didn't have a single gift to give to his children. So he wrote him a story about how he viewed God, because he said, God is not like my children think he is. God is a large African-American woman, and I call her Papa, and she loves me. If you want to be inspired, read a book called The Shack, written by Paul Young. I had a chance to sit down with Paul after the book came out and find out about all of the childhood sexual abuse that he endured for 7 straight years. He said, I didn't see God the way other people did, because the only people safe to me in New Guinea, where we lived, were large women of color, and they cared for me. He said, that's God to me. And on the year, he had nothing to give to his children but a story. He was going to go to Kinko's and print one for each of the 6 kids and one for his wife, and he had enough money by skipping and saving on lunch money to print a copy for his wife and kids and a copy for his sister. And she gave that Kinko printed copy to her pastor, and the book became an international bestseller, the #1 book in the history of the New York Times that's self-published. Oh yeah, the next year, he had more than a Kinko's photocopied book, a story to give his kids. He didn't know that. All he had to give them was the inspiration of kids. I don't have anything to give you as a dad for Christmas, but I can give you what I believe. We can do that. That's what we're talking about with spiritual strength, because things don't last forever. There's a verse that's inside of the Bible, multiple places. And it came to pass. Nowhere in the entire Bible, and I've read it from cover to cover, does it say bad things came to stay. Do you have a day of rest? Do you detox? Do you unplug like The Social Dilemma talked about on Netflix? Do you unplug from your digital devices? It'll make your brain and your body and your health and your soul and your spirit work better. I hope you do. I hope you get out on a bike trail. Maybe I'll see you on the West Orange Trail or the Katy Way. When you and I get out into nature, something powerful happens. Wisdom comes in the silence. Wisdom and peace and power come in our meditative times. And I always believe that happens faster in nature. And for me, maybe for you, the most valuable card in my wallet. Yeah, I know the guy on TV said, "What's in your wallet?" The most valuable card in my wallet's not a credit card. It's my Orange County Public Library card. I love our library. My parents didn't have much growing up, but they took us to the library every week. Back then, you could check out 16 books a week. I remember that number because that's all they'd let me check out, and that's how many I read. And I would have read more, but they wouldn't let you check out more. Bugged me then, kind of bugs me now. So I read 16 books a week. I read almost 10,000 books in my lifetime because when I can go into a book like The Splendid and the Vile, because that's where I'm at right now with Churchill, and I find myself laughing out loud. How do you face that? Because the Churchill that you and I know, the guy who chewed a cigar and who was the bulldog of England, who said to the Nazis for a year by himself, "We will not surrender to this." He learned resiliency every day, and he read every day, and he went out and walked every day. Do you see the pattern? We're not facing the Nazis. We're facing coronavirus, a pandemic that will go on for months to years. And you can get stronger in a pandemic if you know how to connect to your core values, your beliefs. Please turn off the negative news of the day. Yeah, I know you have your favorite UFTV, TV9, Eyewitness News. Those are my friends, or WDBO, way down by Orlando, Orlando's first radio station, or Z88.3, K-Love Radio. I know there are folks listening from all around the country. I love my friends at K-Love. I work with media to share positive ways to cope in times of crisis. So I'm not going to say bad things about the media. They have an important job. I'm just going to tell you, get the news you need, turn off the negative news. Watching people scream at each other on your favorite news channel will not make you better, but it might make you bitter. You see, getting better is not rocket science. It's neuroscience. I'll say it again. It's not rocket science. It's neuroscience. It's what we touched on last month with the habit of resiliency. Norepinephrine makes our brains build new connections and build faster and stronger and better. In the stressful times, people get more creative. Walt Disney went bankrupt multiple times and he got stronger and better. I know you know as a clinician about serotonin and dopamine. Please study and go deep into understanding how norepinephrine will help you to get stronger in a time of crisis, more focused in a time of crisis. The reason so many people can't pass their MCATs, their LSATs, or their GREs is because of test anxiety, which just tells me, even though they've studied like a crazy person, they've pushed and driven, and they can't remember what they studied. It tells me their norepinephrine levels are too low. They don't have any alertness. It's not rocket science. It's brain science. I learned this from my friend Daniel Amen. He has one of the most popular TED Talks. TED stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. And Dr. Amen says, if you change your brain, you'll change your life. It's a PBS special. His new PBS special, The End of Mental Illness. If you make your brain better and you have new life skills, you don't really need as many pills. Life skills, because look at what the research tells us from the CDC. 1 in 4 young adults have seriously contemplated suicide during the pandemic so far. That's from the CDC. 1 in 4. Suicide rates among adolescent females, completed suicide has increased 139%. Somebody that I knew back in college called me yesterday and he said, I know you're a counselor and I've been trying to help my granddaughter and she's 11 and she's dropped down to 88 pounds and I don't know what to do. Do you counsel her? And I said, listen, she's in a life or death situation. Adolescent females, particularly young adolescent females, are life or death right now. It's life or death. Do not go to any more suicide funerals. I've seen more suicides in the 7.5 months of COVID than I've seen in my entire career of over 30 years. Because the research tells us right now, the most likely to say their mental health has failed are the young. Almost every single one of the suicides that I've helped people cope with their family member suicide has been a young person under the age of 35, 10 to 35. Dr. Amen says the data is clear. We have to prioritize mental health, and we need to do it together. Because even if you're mentally healthy before COVID, your entire life since pandemic started and the financial strain and the isolation from the lockdowns may have pushed you into unknown territory. And what I learned from Dr. Amen, who's a clinical neuroscientist who studied at Walter Reed, University of California, and is a double board certified psychiatrist, it's not rocket science, it's neuroscience. And when we add in behavioral steps, all of the pain, and that's all that you and I can see in the hardship. All we can see is pain, COVID. That's all we can see. All right, so I need you to take a breath and step back. Every year, Webster's Dictionary picks a word of the year. The thought at the moment is the word will be unprecedented. I'm rooting for the word resilient, but I think the word will be survivor. I survived 2020. It's kind of like this picture somebody sent me and they said, yeah, this is how my 2020 is going. You're looking for stress relief? Not so much. Here's what PTG does, post-traumatic growth. The pain gets covered over by living. You want to live again. It's what John Gordon, who is a sports psychologist in Jacksonville, John said during the pandemic, you've got to get out of the fear zone into the learning zone and the growth zone. You can't stay stuck in fear. In fear, you hoard food and toilet paper and you complain and you're moody and angry and you dump on the people you say you love and you forward every terrifying message on Facebook to tick other people off or terrify them. Stop it. Learn. You can't heal it until you can feel it. Learn. Check your source. Work on you. Is your body healthier today than when the pandemic started? Or have you gained the COVID-15? But once you learn, it's not just learning, it's doing. It's growing. Do you have more empathy for other people? People that are diverse? These are terribly difficult times. I'm hearing people say awful things. They need to go back and study at the School of Elmo. Elmo would say, oh, look, they're different. I wonder what I could learn. Because when you and I are growing through the difficult times, we have a sense of purpose. We have a sense of deep peace inside. We take a breath and we share that breath with others. You're emotionally healthy because to move from mental illness to mental wellness, you just have to change one letter. You move from ill to we. Mentally ill, mentally well. I guess that's one word. Mental wellness, that's what we're talking about. It's to accept we're in a pandemic. Yep, it's scary. It's challenging. It's difficult. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Well, that's a prayer I prayed since I learned in a 12-step group about 30 years ago. Hi, my name's Dwight. I'm a sinner. Grant me the serenity to accept what I cannot change. And then I learned to pray for wisdom. Then I learned to pray for courage. That's what I learned in 12-step. What'd you learn? Are you working your 12 steps? Don't do all 12 at once, just one. And if you don't have the energy to do one, just take a breath and accept what you cannot change, because that's how you protect energy to move forward. That's how you get the energy to take the next step. If you and I have not met, that very bald man you see in the photo, that's me. Last week, working my way around the Seven Sisters Spring, that's the crack on the Chaz, a beautiful turquoise lagoon. And the Seven Sisters Spring, it's off of the Homosassa River because I needed a mental health day. And so I went out with a friend. You can see, I guess, maybe 20 springs in about 2 hours. They're all kind of clumped together. I hope you'll go on the Chaz sometime. But to climb into that very cold water, because my friend said, you need to walk around this. There's some caves and some things you can see. But he said, sometimes you got to leave the boat and take a step. I'm glad I did, because that's post-traumatic growth. And aggressive self-care is to say, okay, here's my friend who does this every single week and has for years and is a park ranger. I trust him and I'll walk with him. He said, you got to see this up close. The boat doesn't do it justice. Sometimes you have to pray for the strength to take the next step. Oh, yeah. Remember when we started, I told you about the Gatlinburg fire? When Sheila and I were in Gatlinburg last month. This is what it looks like now. It's growing again. You can see, yeah, there's battle scars, but you know what happens after a forest fire? It grows back faster. It grows back better because it burned off so much of the underbrush. The poet laureate of the United States before Miss Maya Angelou was Robert Frost. And Robert Frost said he could sum up everything he had learned in almost 100 years. He said, here's what I've learned about life. It goes on. Life goes on. That's what I'm about. That's what I talk about on podcasts and webcasts and on social media every day, on LinkedIn and different places, but especially here with you at Central Florida Behavioral Hospital. Life goes on because when you and I can move from stress, we move into a strength and a creative zone of norepinephrine. And now you're stronger and you're better and you have creative thinking in a crisis. That's what I want to see. That we move out of the stress and we move into the strength, and we do it better by utilizing the 5 core clips, the key elements of aggressive self-care. I know that we started a few minutes late, but we've got a couple of minutes for questions. Gabi, do we have any questions in the text box?
Why, we do not have any questions. I would just like to tell you, thank you so much for doing this training for us. You know, there's one thing that you said and provided an article to us that you wrote at the beginning of this series that we're doing on COVID, and that was titled, if I remember correctly, Breathe in Faith, Breathe Out Fear.
Yes, it's at your website. I mean, it's on the
is.
Center for Behavioral Center website, and I hope it's on the Facebook page.
It is. It certainly is. And that's on the resources section of our website. And you can go ahead and see that, and you can see the webinar as well. But I wanted to mention that, you know, you brought up this point of how we can choose to live, right? We can choose to live in fear, or we can choose to live in faith. And by attending this webinar today, you've chosen to live in faith. You've chosen to learn, and you've chosen to grow rather than to live in fear. And for that, I'm thankful to you. Because for mental health, we all know there's no I in together. And the only way we get better is together. That's how mental health works. And so, Dwight, thank you so much for continuing to do these webinars. It helps so many people. Not one person has dropped off this entire webinar. That's how engaged people are. And we'll continue to do them and to service the community and to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to give people the support that they need to get through this incredibly challenging year. And with that, I am going to say thank you to you, Dwight, and thank you to everybody so much for joining. And I want to wish everybody an absolutely blessed Friday and weekend, and enjoy your families and the peace this weekend. And we'll see you next time.